Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Bailey, and welcome to MalleTalk. We're going to be talking about some brand new mallets that came out just recently. We are going to feature them at the booth at PASIC here next month in November, and they are part of our Go2 Series, which is our series of mallets for our signature artists that want to reach in the bag and grab something, and that's going to work 95% of the time. I call it the 9-iron. Today we're talking with MalleTalk signature artist Mark Boseman. Mark, hello, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. A little congested, but that's okay.
A little bit of the same here. So we'll be in this together.
Yes, I think that also goes along with PASIC, is everybody being congested and
Yeah.
kind of freaked out by the change of weather.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, great. You are officially our first guest on MalleTalk to talk about new mallets, and I'm really excited because I was kind of involved in the tail end of the process,
Mm-hmm.
but really think we got something special here. I was fortunate enough to see you play last year at PASIC, and just like have a ton of respect for you as a musician. And I know that the extension of that is the mallets, and that's really kind of what facilitates a lot of the music making that you do, obviously in conjunction with your technical proficiencies. But we're here to talk about the mallets.
Yep.
So Mark Boseman series, the MBO mallet, MBO, Mark Boseman mallet. Talk to me a little bit about your concept. Like, you went from playing, of course, I'm sure you have a ton of mallets in your bag, to, you know what, I need something else. Talk to me a little bit about that process, that thought process, and what kind of got the ball rolling with the Go2 mallet.
Well, I think to pinpoint it in one specific place, it's kind of hard. I think it's just I've been thinking about mallets since I've been playing marimba. So it would always be, I'm in a practice room, whether I'm in undergrad or grad school or, at my job, thinking, oh, I wonder what this would sound like, or I wonder what that would sound like. So it was always kind of an ever evolving process throughout the years to try to figure out what I would like. And I think I kind of came to the conclusion when I was kind of figuring out what would I ever want in a mallet. And I think the idea that came back to me time and time again was, how far can we take a set of mallets that can be as colorful as possible? Meaning, how many sounds can we get out of these mallets? We always talk about two-tone mallets, or we talk about single-tone mallets. And I always wanted to see, what the possibilities were to get as many different colors out of the mallets as possible. And so I think that was kind of the birth of the idea for these, was how colorful can we make these mallets, and how many different sounds can we get out of a single pair of, or single set of mallets?
Yeah, which I think would be of interest to just about anybody, because typically, for percussionists, we have we're gear people. We love having stuff. We have tons and tons of sticks and mallets and
Yeah.
drums and cymbals and all sorts of stuff. And that's how we differentiate colors or create unique sounds. We reach in the bag and we grab something else.
Yeah.
In this case, that's fine. And we're not saying don't do that. We're saying that when you reach in the bag and grab these, your palette of possibilities is extremely broad. That's a really cool, really interesting, especially as a go-to model, because again, you want this mallet to work 95% of the time. This is your 9-iron. This is what you're going to use most of the time.
Yeah. And when we were talking in a couple of these meetings, you were kind of asking me, some of these questions when we were meeting, and it was just like, how many different colors can we get? How far can we take this? So that was, you're right. That was kind of the idea of just anybody can pick these up, but the more that you use them, the more you learn about them and the more sounds you get out of them. So that, if you're picking them up for the first time and you're just starting to play, they're going to sound good. Whether 10 years down the road, you've really learned how to, manipulate the sound on the instrument, and you've kind of dug into these different levels for the mallets, and they have so many different applications and so many different sounds that you learn about through using them, and you learn about through your own experiences.
Yeah, and the teacher in me, just hearing this, and of course this isn't the first time I've heard it, but just in this moment, hearing this, the teacher in me kind of comes alive, because I'm thinking, I have some developing percussionists, developing marimba players. Before I give them 50 different options of different mallets that are different head hardnesses and different weights and different rattan, versus birch, all the other specs. There's 1,000 of different options out there. me personally, and maybe other teachers would agree with this, is I would want one student to be able to maximize one thing
Hmm.
before they're able to move on to, or before I allow them to move on
Yeah.
to, having a few other options, because I think that develops a good sense of touch and a good sense of musicianship. So maybe can you speak a little bit to that, kind of how the possibilities that are built into the mallet translate to, sonic possibilities through a sense of touch and musicianship?
Hmm. Well, we designed them, or when I was kind of going back and forth with MalleTalk about, okay, how do we make this possible? And I think I even in those early meetings, I think Lee was in there, and I said, I don't know if this is possible, but I'd like to try and see what we can kind of come up with. So I guess the idea that we came up with was kind of a harder core, so it's kind of an acrylic core that's got some brightness to it with a latex band around it. And then during the process of kind of finding the right wrapping style and the right yarn, we kind of came up with the idea of kind of a looser wrapping on the outside of it,
Mhm.
so that you know at the bottom end of the dynamics, the softest part, it kind of sounds like a softer mallet. And then as you start to get a little bit louder, it starts to move into kind of the 12 part of the mallet, I guess you could
Mhm.
say. And then when you really dig into the bars, you get into the deepest part of the core, so it changes again. um, so it kind of allows you to feather some notes and kind of slur some things to where you can go from really loud to really soft, and it kind of changes the sound of the instrument for you, so
Yeah.
that you have a lot of different possibilities going from a really bright to a really dark, depending on what the music calls for and what you're kind of wanting to say on the instrument.
Yeah, I love that, because it just gives you a ton of possibilities and encourages you to really engage with the instrument and be rewarded for it, and
Mhm.
have, all these colors and sounds available to you without having to
Mhm.
switch or do anything like that. So I think that's really cool. So moving on to, taking this from concept to reality, we had to go through a development process.
Mhm.
And from the time that you said, here's my concept, Mr. Stevens, what was the process like to take that and go through prototyping and iterations, and how did you test them? Like, give us a little bit of a peek
Mhm.
behind the curtain as to what that was like.
So it was actually it was a very fun process for me, because it was kind of me nerding out on a lot of things. So in these initial meetings, I kind of said the same things that I just told you, and this is kind of this is my idea. Um, how could we make this possible? And we talked a little bit about, so the kind of the first step was, um, MalleTalk sent me kind of different mallets that had different yarns on them. So we were kind of, the first step was, okay, what yarn do we want on this thing? What do
And,
we
it,
sound
and
like?
does that help you kind of like, let's establish some kind of a baseline,
Hmm.
to build off of?
Yeah, so that was kind of the first step of how much contact sound is there? What do these sound like? What does the yarn on this do for the mallet? So they sent me a few. Obviously, I have a good collection, so I kind of pulled out mine. So what I did was I pulled my marimba into our concert hall here, and I set up all my microphones like I was recording, so I could get the best sound as possible. Obviously, I wasn't video recording, but I wanted to hear what these mallets sounded like. So I just pulled out all of my mallets with my microphones and just started playing. And then I spent probably a week just listening to those recordings that I had made of, like, what does this sound like? What does this yarn sound like? Um, and the one that I kind of came back to was, I actually pulled out my Albright Stefan Harris mallets
Hmm.
and started playing those. And I really liked kind of the pure sound that those got. And
Hmm.
so that was the yarn that we ended up choosing. So I just set up all my microphones and went in there and did it, and then went back with the best headphones that I could find and just tried to find as clear of a sound as possible. And then in order to get the weight right, because that was kind of an important part for me, was
Of course,
how do
yeah.
what do these feel like in terms of weight? Um, I went to the grocery store and bought a food, like what you weigh food on, like a, yeah. So and then I went
Food
back
scale, yeah.
and I pulled out every single mallet that I owned, and I weighed every single one of them,
Hmm.
and then I wrote them all down in grams. And I was astonished about how, like, big of a difference like 4 grams in weight makes.
Yeah.
So I weighed every single mallet and I kind of felt, okay, which one of these feel just right? And then I went back and then I think I sent that in an email to Lee, and I was like, here's the weights of every single mallet that you have. Let's go for this target weight right here. So I tried to be as scientific as possible in that development process.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So the testing part of it sounds like it was just a blast, you
it
know?
was a lot of fun. It was me being a huge nerd,
Yeah,
and
I mean, I think we're all we can all relate to that.
it was
Uh,
great.
did
Yeah.
you happen to test, so I mean, you know, you're obviously fortunate enough to have this beautiful concert hall
Mhm.
and lots of gear. Did you ever test in, whether it was like in the first couple iterations or towards the very end, test in like kind of normal circumstances, like in a band room? Did you give them to some colleagues and students? What was that like? What kind of feedback did you get from them that was helpful to kind of bringing this across the finish line?
I did. As we got closer towards the end, I think we had 4 or 5 different versions of the prototypes. And I remember I pulled the first one, the first ones out of the box. I naively thought, "Oh, these are gonna be the ones. This is gonna be it." Because I thought, I've said all these things and, gave them as much instruction. And I pulled them out of the box and I was like, these aren't anywhere close to what I said. What's going on? And then I had to come to the realization of like, oh, there's a process that goes along and it was just kind of me being kind of naive about what was going to happen. They're a different color. And I'm like, these don't look red. These are look
Yeah.
orange. So as we kind of narrowed it down and it kind of got further, yes, I would, record them in our band room with the really loud air conditioner that's really dead and makes you sad as a marimba player sometimes. So we did that. I gave them to my students. They actually used them on our recitals, like so I could hear what they were sounding like. And I actually, it was kind of funny. I had a student who's playing Bach, and I was like, so I gave him a pair of the prototypes, and one of the other faculty members during his recital, who plays organ, actually turned around after he got done playing and he says, "Oh, those are really good mounts. Those were perfect for that." And I was like, "Oh, by the way, I just designed those." So he had no idea that I designed them, but he went on and on about the mallet. So I had students playing with them. I was playing with them. It's kind of banging around with them in the worst possible places that we could find, in addition to the best possible places that we could find.
Yeah, making sure they're going to survive the battlefield.
There you go.
Yeah, and I know the prototyping process can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster because you have to be, you're set on the original vision,
Hmm.
and sometimes when you move component A, it affects component B.
Hmm.
You make the weight a little bit harder and or a little bit heavier, and it
Yeah.
factors in maybe to the context sound. You mentioned Bach, which is a perfect segue here. Talk to us a little bit about where you really feel in terms of literature and application, where these mallets really, really shine.
Well, obviously my favorite composer is Bach. So that was one of the first things that I kind of gravitated towards because I would always be playing and the mouse that I was using, they were great.
Hmm.
But I was like, man, these are like 90% there of kind of what I would want it. So Bach's music was always kind of one of the first ones in there. And kind of one of the genesis of kind of the way I think about it was actually at the uh, the summer marimba seminar
Hmm.
back in like 2002 or three when I went to it, and Lee played us this recording of the Bach Chaconne by like Julian Bream. I don't know if anybody's heard that, but I just remember being blown away by the different colors that he was getting out of his instrument.
Yeah.
And it was like he was orchestrating as he was playing. And that was the first time where I was like, I wonder if I could do that on marimba. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where these kind of came from. But so Bach was always a big inspiration. And then I tried to figure out, okay, how many different types. So I tried to make these as applicable as humanly possible. So they've got a little bit of a darker sound to them, but they can be a little bit bright. So hopefully they apply to as many different things as possible. I don't know if they're applying to, late 70s, early 80s Japanese avant-garde marimba music. Maybe they're not perfect for that, but you know, hopefully they're as useful as possible in as many different types of music as possible. So
Yeah. Well, I think
definitely Bach.
yeah, they certainly sound like, and actually Bach was one of the first things I was thinking about as well, just because I think no matter where you want to go in marimba studies, you're going to confront his music at some point. You're going to play
Mhm.
some of his partitas, and often at times as percussionists, we have to try a little harder to emulate and express because we're emulating other instruments. Things that are inherent in as a violinist don't come so naturally for us as a percussionist. Everything tends to be a little bit more linear. So expression really is a key, and these sounds like they really help for that. Somebody that has purchased the mallets, which will be available for those at PASIC, what are some ways they can optimize, make the best of, make the most of, have them last the longest? Are there any things that you would recommend to percussionists or players to kind of help, keep these around as long as possible?
Yeah, I mean, don't like throw them around. So just let them on the floor or anything. I think just take care of them like you would take care of any other mallets. The yarn is really durable, so you can hopefully they'll last a really long time. So yeah, I think keeping them in your bag, keeping them in a safe place, and all the normal things that we would do. I don't know if there's anything special that needs to be done about them. I don't think I don't think they're like $150 Tiffany mallets where you have to keep them in like a hyperbolic chamber and at a certain temperature or anything like that. But
No, no mallet, no marimba humidors.
no, not in there. I don't have a climate humidity controlled safe in my office or anything like
Yeah.
that. So I think just take care of them like you would take care of any other mallets, and I think they're going to last a long time.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, the yarn's very durable. I know also they have threaded heads. So those that aren't aware of how MalleTalk puts our mallets together, we use what we call glued and screwed heads, which are threaded onto the shaft. They're backed up with aero grade epoxy. They're really, really durable. Pull-out strength is increased by about 75% over a normal mallet. So these will definitely stand the test of time.
I've never had problems. I mean, I still have mallets that are older than my students right now that still sound great. So
I get pictures also. I get pictures that, hey, I've had these for 25 years and they look like, they bought them last week. It's incredible. So, well, Mark, listen, thank you very much for sharing this. Is there anything else, anything last? What's coming up for you? Performances, clinics, tours?
We're working on getting some performances lined up for the spring. Right now, we're just trying to survive the end of the semester. We've got a percussion ensemble concert coming up in a couple of weeks, which Valerie Naranjo is going to be joining us for.
Oh, I love Valerie.
So we're kind of trying to get ready for that, and got some performances with her, and I'll be at PASIC wandering around the booth if anybody has any questions or anything like that. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again. Thanks everybody for joining MalleTalk, and Mark, we'll see you at PASIC.
Thank you. I'll see you there.
All righty.